So Beyonce's back. She has
Yeah.
made her grand return to the mainstream. I think we were all a little bit suspicious where a couple of months ago at the Grammys, she showed up. Now, it made sense that she would show up because Jay-Z was being honored with a very prestigious award that night, but
Hmm.
Beyonce came looking a little bit different. She had a cowboy hat on, a very cowboy-esque outfit. And I
Yeah.
think people started to think like, oh, what are we doing here? Is this like a new cowboy era that she's going to enter into? And that's exactly what's happening here. Cowboy Carter is serving as a new venture for Beyonce, sort of a new exploration of not only country music but really multiple genres when you think about it.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, her 8th studio album, but this is serving as the second installment in what appears to be a planned trilogy of projects now. I
Right.
think a lot of us thought that when Renaissance came out a couple of years ago that was Act 1, of course, but I saw a lot of people guessing, well, Act 2 is probably going to be the tour or
The
visuals
visuals.
or
Yep.
movie or whatever it was going to be.
Hmm.
Many people had a guess and a thought about that, but this is much more ambitious. This is clearly going to be a 3-act project on a sort of album basis. 3 completely different eras that she's tackling, and Cowboy Carter again is serving as the second installment. This is a large, sweeping album that has a lot of guest appearances, a lot of producers. Dolly Parton is on this album, Willie Nelson, John
Hmm.
Batiste, Post Malone, Miley Cyrus. There are many features here, and there's quite a bit to talk about. I think from just the standpoint of who Beyonce is and where she's at in her career, because we do talk about her quite a bit on this podcast. Because when she drops, it's a moment. It's more than really just
Every
music.
time.
She's encompassed just so many different lanes and so many different industries. It really becomes a moment. Before we dive into specific thoughts, just want to kind of get your general introductory sort of big picture thoughts about just like this new era that we are entering into, that it's somewhat of a continuation of Renaissance. There's a similar spirit and energy there, but
Hmm.
obviously it's a completely different feel, aesthetic, and ultimately a purpose that I think she's trying to accomplish with this new project.
Yeah, I think, Beyonce has been around for so long and has such a fruitful career that even in her Renaissance tour and kind of like those documentary uh uh you know words that she says, she's like, I kind of learned that I don't really have to prove anything to anybody. And I think she's just in a moment in her life where she's doing what she wants to do. She's experimenting where she wants to experiment. And in some ways, because she's so successful at it, it never really feels like an experiment. It always feels like Beyonce did this thing. It didn't. Was that an experiment? It was too good to really feel like a completely an experiment. So I really think she's just in this different bag of where she's just trying new things, and she's having fun, and like she said, she has nothing to prove to anybody. So she's going to do what she wants to do, and I think that's exactly what this is. That's what Cowboy Carter is. I'll talk about it more later, but it's really added context knowing that Cowboy Carter was supposed to be Act 1, not Renaissance. But she decided, like post pandemic, she was like, people need to dance, so I need to put out Renaissance. But knowing that Cowboy Carter was supposed to be first is like, oh, it makes sense. And I actually didn't know that until after I had listened to the album through at least one time. I was like, oh shoot, that's why I feel like the way I do at the end of this album. So man, I think she's just in a completely different lane than most people right now. She's not necessarily trying to like get again approval of anybody, which that's what a lot of albums do, right? You're literally going in for you're as an artist, you're going in for people to listen. And I'm not saying Beyonce doesn't have that, but she's like, people are going to listen no matter what I do, so I'm going to do what I want. And that's what Cowboy Carter kind of is. She is a girl from Texas, and so this is just that. It's fun to see her, I think, in this moment of kind of not caring in a way that also is caring. It's really hard to explain, but it's a really cool thing to see in real time. She has matured to just a different place in her life. So I really love where she is right now, man. And Cowboy Carter is a reflection of that.
Yeah, I think that's her recognizing her power and influence, that
Yeah.
she can change things. She can change people's careers and trajectories and people's perceptions of certain things, and that is a positive use of her influence. And you can criticize certain aspects about her, absolutely, but I think when it comes to the music and it comes to shining a light on things historically that have not had that opportunity to gain the exposure and the
Mm-hmm.
mainstream success that she's accumulated for the past 30 years, essentially, now she's using that energy to redirect it, I think, in a positive way, especially on these genres where historically, as she eloquently talked about in her Instagram caption, leading up to this album, where it's like, I had to do a deep dive on this, even knowing that I have these Southern connections and I have these
Right.
ties to Texas. I still had to
Hmm.
do a deep dive and learn about this and truly understand what this album and this project was going to ultimately shape up to be. And so she's just such a force in so many different aspects. Not only is she a singer, but actress and songwriting and directing. And we talked a lot about her movie and her cinematic abilities and being a producer and an entrepreneur. It's all coming together, really, I think, to ultimately give us something that is greater than the sum of its parts, like the end product of just all the work that she puts into these various projects at any given moment. It's giving us real, I think, real work that's going to be contextualized and talked about and discussed for a long, long time.
Hmm.
Regardless of how you feel about a certain project, there's no denying that there's just so much effort and thought put into these things that it's going to warrant discussion at
Yeah.
every turn. There
Hmm.
there are people who didn't necessarily enjoy Renaissance, but I dare you to say that Renaissance is not going to be an album that's heavily talked about in 10 to 15 years just because of where it was born from and what it was
Yeah.
trying to do. And I think that that's going to be a very similar conversation that we have with Cowboy Carter. That's just the entire energy that she's on in this stage in her career. But ultimately we do have the album now, and it's a long one. It's like 27 tracks, about
Yeah.
80 minutes long. Definitely caught me off guard because Renaissance felt like a more, I don't want to say concise. It's certainly a full length album, but she really gets to it. It's the music, and it immediately has that vibe. But this one breathes a little bit more. It takes its time.
Hmm.
And as I said, there's a lot of guest appearances, and this is also different, somewhat different territory for her. She's done it before, but she's doing a lot of covers and interpolations of music. Not
Yeah.
everything is 100% originals. Of course, it's her own take, her own spin, but she's implementing a lot of different artists and acts in previous music history here. So ultimately, how did you feel about the album? What were your overall thoughts on Cowboy Carter?
Beyonce is out here flexing right now, just because she can. This album, Cowboy Carter, is a amalgamation of who Beyonce is as a Southern Houston, Texas girl, and the 40 plus Beyonce that has lived life and is ready to not only have fun but to sing some ballads, which she does on this album, a lot actually. In this is, I think I think this album and Renaissance was a little bit also about challenging herself, where not necessarily that she's always been complacent or comfortable, but she is pop and R&B artist. That's what she has been. Now, quickly over the span of 2 to 3 years, she is now a country, folk music, house artist, and it's really crazy to be able to say that she can do all these things and do them well. Cowboy Carter is absolutely fantastic. Club Renaissance kind of goes through more of a Club Renaissance thing. This is more like a radio show kind of album, that deals with all these country themes, and it is phenomenal. Every single feature on this album is for a reason. It's very meticulous. It's very on brand and accurate for the song and the stories that Beyonce is trying to tell. From having Linda Martell say some things over, from the Willie Nelson being on the album, from Miley Cyrus in Post Malone being on the album. Everything is very, very intentional, and I really love that about it. Like you said, this album was made to breathe. She's singing more, and you can feel it. And it does start a little slower, not necessarily for a bad thing, but it does start a little slower than Renaissance does. But by the end, you're like, this thing is kind of jamming, and there's so many different sounds embedded within a lot of these songs. And I love the experimentation. She has people like Shabuzi on the album, who has been around as like this black country hip hop, again, all these mixes of genres. In I think one of my favorite lines of the whole album to me that explains the album is Linda Martell saying, "Genre is a funny thing, ain't it?" because a lot of people like to criticize Beyonce about what genre is. And this album is like, I don't care what y'all talking about. This is Cowboy Carter. There is no genre. I can't be defined necessarily to anything, though I'm pulling from these cowboyish country roots. And so, man, this album is, I think it's phenomenal. I think I'm not sure where it fits for me right now, but all I can say is right now in this moment, I really do love it and like it, as it's so different from Renaissance until like the end of Cowboy Carter, which feels like, oh, this feels like it might be leading into Renaissance, which is again a very interesting thing to me. But man, yeah, this is Beyonce flexing to me, just as Renaissance I thought was Beyonce flexing, but in a different way, in a different tone, in more country than we have really ever seen her before, man. And so I think I think her message on this album is very clear, and I hope other people understand it too. But yeah, she's walking different right now, and I think this was like the third or fourth, fifth stamp to show us that was the case.
Well, here's the thing. One thing you don't want to do with Beyonce is to tell her that she can't do something, tell her that she can't be somewhere, fuck with her really in any capacity, because you're going to feel it. You're going to feel the wrath of Beyonce through her talent, her sheer immense talent that pretty much nobody else on earth encompasses or possesses. And she doesn't do it, obviously. She doesn't do it immediately. She waits. She's very, very intentional about every step that she takes. And we see that the birth of this album came from an incident that happened almost 8 years ago at the Country Music Awards, where she talked about, and she didn't single them out and name it, but I think we can all safely say that that was probably the experience, where she performed at the Country Music Awards in 2016 on the heels of Lemonade. She performed with the Chicks, which is another group that had long been outcasted from that particular genre. They were somewhat blacklisted. She brought them back. She performs on that stage where historically we don't see people that look like us on that stage. And it was harshly rejected, and it was criticized, and there was racism and sexism. All of that stuff was very apparent. And it's pretty clear and indicative that she took that moment and said, okay, bet. We'll see what that's really about. And I'm going to show you exactly what this means to me and how I can come back and just showcase why not only am I the best in the world at what I do, but also I'm going to make sure that I give the proper spotlight and attention on the people that precede me, because she's always done that throughout her entire career. And I think that that's what separates her from a lot of different artists. You'll constantly see her bigging up the people that came before her, the Diana Rosses, the Tina Turners, the Aretha Franklins. Like, she always shows respect to these people. And she's doing that in a way where she can not only acknowledge what came before her, but she can pay it forward for the next generation, because there's a bridging of the gap happening on Cowboy Carter, which, if you couldn't tell by now, I think it's a fantastic album. I think it's wonderful. I'm shocked and surprised, to be honest, at how much I really do enjoy it. And it's one of those things that the more I listen to it, I enjoy it even more. And ultimately, when I'm contextualizing Beyonce and just this run that she's been on, the work over the course of her last 3 albums, really 4 albums, but I'm going to single out her last 3, Lemonade, Renaissance, and now Cowboy Carter. I think that they're so associated with American iconography in these really, really large scale ways. Like, her albums are tackling some big ideas that have to be unpacked and have to really be soaked into. You know, you look at Renaissance highlighting Black people and queer people of color and their contributions to house music and how important they were to the birth of that genre and to the expansion of that genre. And then even if you go back to Lemonade, I mean, I think that on that album, she was sowing the seeds for Cowboy Carter on Lemonade. There's a lot of Southern aesthetics on Lemonade. There's a lot of cowboy culture on Lemonade. There's a lot of that iconography that really takes shape on this album that she really, I think, birthed in the Lemonade era. And we started to talk about that because right after Lemonade comes out, you get Old Town Road from Lil Nas X. You get the whole yeehaw movement, the yeehaw agenda that really started to take shape. The fact that I think people started to recognize, like, oh yeah, Black people have been associated with this iconography. This isn't nothing new. Like, Black cowboys is a new thing. Like, there were Black cowboys in the old American West, and that's such a pivotal time for this country. That's such a big, important time. The idea of the cowboy, of the American West, it's so ingrained in the fabric of what America has come to be. And every time out, even if it's just on a musical scale, Beyonce is tackling and wrestling and challenging the ideas of what any of this shit means anyway. The fact that these places that we historically don't see ourselves in, okay, I'm actually going to show you that that's not true. And also, we're powerful. We own these spaces. We're influential in
Mm-hmm.
these spaces. And I'm not going to limit myself to genre and make it just about country. And she said it in her caption, saying a country album, it's a Beyonce album. And it's true because this expands all genres. It's blues and folk and hip hop and R&B. All of that stuff very much is a part of this. And she brings in these lesser known country music artists and gives them the opportunity to shine. You know, people like Tanner Adele, or even like a Linda Martell who comes before her, but who has long often been ignored in that space. And she's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, let's paint this picture. Let's show you exactly why she has been wrestling against these stereotypes and these tropes and this racism for so long. And she's kind of acted alone in that space. And now maybe she doesn't have to be alone. Maybe this album, maybe this movement can provide her a new opportunity to where people can like really just start to wake up and see like, no, we can be here too. We not only deserve to be here, but we started a lot of this shit at the end of the day anyway. You know, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of this music comes from Black people to begin with. It's nothing new. And so I just love that she's taking that stamp and she's taking this moment and this opportunity to just tackle these really, really big things. And really, I think, challenging at every point and opportunity that she gets what American ideology and iconography looks like. You know, even the cover itself, I mean, that position that she's sitting in on the stallion, that's a position of prominence and power. Her holding the American flag, that very much is reminiscent of rodeo queens. Like, she's obviously just making a statement, and just showcasing like, no, this is our space. We deserve to be here. We can obviously occupy this and do it damn well if we choose to. And of course, she has an ability like pretty much no one else can, or has and possesses, where she's just so immensely talented. So I love the album. I think it has a lot of great tracks, and it very well might be like one of the most expensive albums ever produced. I mean, if you look at the names on the
It's
credits,
crazy.
it's ridiculous. You know, you talked about Miley Cyrus and Post Malone, Stevie Wonder. Just found out he's here on the harmonicas on the Jolene interpolation that she does.
Mm-hmm.
She does a cover of the Beatles song, you know, from Paul
Yep.
McCartney, Blackbird. Like, that's a lot of money. Dolly Parton, Willie Nelson, these are not cheap artists to come by. Like, these are a lot of legends. And so
Yeah.
I can only imagine what the budget for this album was. But, you know, if anybody's going to spend money and just showcase their power and their prowess and their ability to pull together all these different genres and generations, nobody can do it like her. She's singular in that way. And so it's fantastic. And I'm just going to go ahead and make a bold prediction now. And this might be crazy, but I'm willing to say it, and I'm saying it early. But earlier this year, when she sort of made her re-debut with these cowboy aesthetics, a lot of that Grammy conversation was about what Jay-Z said about her. Like, how can you call yourself a credible committee when Beyonce is not won album of the
Album of
year
the year.
ever, and
Mm-hmm.
she's been nominated countless times, and she lost again this year for
Yep.
Renaissance and lost to Taylor Swift. I think that this is the one. I actually think that this is the one. Not that she needs it, not that it's going to prove or change
Right.
anything,
Mm-hmm.
but I actually think that this is the album that can go all the way and win album of the year for her at the Grammys. And we'll know by next year because it's already going to be eligible by this point in time. And funnily enough, Taylor Swift is releasing an album shortly, or did she already release it? It's not out yet, is it?
I remember she announced it, but I think it's late April. I think it's
Late
later this
April, so
month.
it's gonna come out.
Mm-hmm.
So they're gonna face off again, and you know, it might just go to Taylor once again, and she'll be the most winningest Grammy Award winner ever
We
in
got to
terms of
fight
that
at that
specific
point.
category.
We got to box at that point. There's no
Especially
way.
if it's not great. But I think it's safe. Or no, it's not safe. It's definitely not safe. Let me take that
Definitely
back.
not
It's
safe.
not safe at all. It's the most unsafe prediction I could really make. But I like making bold predictions. I think
Mm-hmm.
that this is going to be the album that wins her album of the year. I actually think that it has the capacity, the ability, but also one thing you said earlier that's very apparent on this album. There are legit ballads, like actual
Ballads.
ballads that she's like
Sing it.
showcasing her vocal range, her
Mm-hmm.
instrumental capabilities, her just ear for music and sonics, all of those things, and just the fact that it's traversing so many genres. It feels almost undeniable, you know. And I don't know
Yeah.
what the rest of the year looks like for music, but I mean, I'd be
I know
shocked
it
if
don't look like
anything comes
this.
along, yeah, looking like this or sounding like this. Like, it just doesn't. The energy doesn't feel that way. So I'm gonna say that I'll probably look on this a year from now and say like, what the fuck was I thinking? It's the Grammys. They're obviously not going to give it to her. They never do.
Idiots. No, I'm just
But
playing.
no, they are. They absolutely are
They
idiots.
are.
But
Yeah, no, they're
this
pretty
this
idiots.
this feels like the one that can be the one for her to actually win album of the year. And fuck, Jay-Z might have knew what he was doing, because he obviously knew that this album was coming. He knew what it was,
Oh,
what
he's
this
on
album
it.
could do. He's
He
definitely
has
right.
writing credits. Yeah.
So I think he probably knew exactly the type of stroke he was making with that whole speech. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you have a year to correct this if you so choose. Like, just know I'm not gonna
He
announce the
said,
album, but you got a year to make this right, y'all. That's why I'm gonna fucking call you out right now. This is all so intentional. They are not fucking. None of this is by accident by any stretch. So that's what
yeah,
I'm gonna go ahead and predict now.
probably there's probably a whole nother chance after this album, right? Act 3 got to be a rock album, right? I mean,
I was gonna ask, what
we
does that look like? What could Act 3 be at this point? Because it's anybody's guess, just considering where she goes.
but that's all right. So the thing in common right now is horses and the cowboy hats, right? I mean, we got the Renaissance.
True. Yeah.
Renaissance, she's on a horse. Everybody was wearing cowboy hats, just platinum. Here we are again, Cowboy Carter. She's on a horse, cowboy hats. It's actual cowboy this time. What else? You could call it a rock horse. Hello? I know it's a crazy pun. But
Yo,
I mean, that's like the only job. It's one of the only genres she hasn't touched for real. You know what I'm saying? Of course, she's touched it, but like in like this, like a whole. I mean, I don't know, man. I think she might go rock, and I think there's another chance there too.
it's
But these
guess,
are all genres touched and pretty much made by Black people.
Yeah.
Who all of this is reclamation. That's what all of this is. It's all reclamation. And I feel like that's one of the last real big genres we have to reclaim is rock. And I think she's going to do that.
No, that certainly makes sense. It would definitely add up in track, because this is like the theme of this trilogy, is that reclamation piece, and of course rock music, also another huge genre which historically Black people have not gotten the just credit that they deserve for inventing that genre. It's gotten better over the past generation or so, but it's still a lot of work that can be done, I think, to again showcase that. So it's a good guess. It's a really good guess. I mean, it would make the most sense in terms of how to round out what this era for her is going to be like, this era from Renaissance to whatever Act 3 is going to be. I do want to ask though, do you think that she's going to go on tour? Because I don't know if it's like completely obvious. Because one thing I do remember from Renaissance in that documentary was that she was very much ready to take a break and kind of be away, spend time with friends and family, really just invest in herself and her personal life. And if you saw that movie, if you went to the tour, you can just only imagine how grueling that type of schedule is, that type of production is, and just the amount of work that goes into that, because she's a perfectionist. These are not small things, and it's one of the most successful tours ever, the Renaissance tour. Do you foresee that she'll go back on the road? I mean, I can visualize it. It's all clearly there with the aesthetics on what she could achieve, but is that the move? Is that going to be a part of this rollout for Cowboy Carter?
Part of me doesn't think so. Part of me thinks, I think every act will have a different garnish, right? Where Act 1 was technically we were the visual, right? Like we were the visual, a documentary gets made. That's the garnish on Act 1. I don't think we get no music videos from Renaissance. I could eat my words later. I hope I eat my words. I would love visual. I don't think we're getting it. I think we were the visual. Act 2, I think it's going to be a different garnish. It might not be even a tour. It could be, maybe we get visuals for this act. You know what I mean? Maybe we get a movie, like something else. Like part of me doesn't think she'll go on tour either. That's a lot to go on a Renaissance tour, all them cities, all those dates, and to do it again the next year. I understand she's Beyonce, but like you said, she's a human being.
She got limits, absolutely.
She got limits. I don't see that happening. At least not until I can see it maybe happening next year, right? I can see it like, oh, maybe she's touring next year. She's taking this whole year off. I can see that. But part of me thinks it may be something else on top that's not a tour this time, that maybe we can sink our teeth into. And same thing potentially for what may be for Act 3. Maybe there's something different, a different garnish, a different visual, something that goes on top of that act as well. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it right now.
I think that unlike Renaissance, where she brought that experience to us. She brought Club Renaissance to the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think for Cowboy Carter, we're gonna have to go to her, and I think she's gonna do a residency in Vegas. There have been rumors that she will take over the Sphere in Vegas. I think that that's probably the next step. She's gonna turn the fucking Sphere into the rodeo. That's what I foresee. That we're gonna have
That's
to go to her.
crazy.
It would be ridiculous, right? Using that technology, using that completely immersive spherical dome, which has the highest grade technology you can use from a visual perspective, and imagine what she would fucking do there. But that's a bold guess. Obviously, again, could also eat
They
my
need a bigger
words.
sphere.
But I think build 2 more spheres. Like, let it
Build
just
2
take
more
over
spheres.
3.
Yeah.
I don't think that she's gonna go on a national or worldwide global stadium tour. That just does seem like a lot to do.
Yeah.
Even if she did it next year, because I definitely don't think it's happening this year. But even to do it next year, I mean, that's still just like a 2-year gap in between the
That's
last
a
one
lot.
and this one. It's a lot.
Mhm.
Most big artists, they take like 5, 6, 7 years between those big massive stadium tours. But I could see her doing something of a limited engagement in Las Vegas for 3 months. I got
Mhm.
30 days. That's it. You get
That's
30
crazy.
opportunities to see me. It's definitely the most exclusive shit ever because it's only like
25K.
yeah, oh, absolutely, because it's only like
for
18,000 seats in there to begin with, so it feels like that could be the thing because there were already rumors that she was going to take over the Sphere, and I was like, well, Renaissance, that era is kind of over, but I didn't know she had a new album coming. But if those
Mhm.
talks are indeed still happening, what better way for her to really shape all of this in her own image than to just take over a venue and own it for an extended amount of time? Will she do that? I don't know. I do feel like she's kind of an artist of the people, and that is
Yeah.
a limiting experience. If you do that, most people are not going to see it, unlike Renaissance. Like, most people won't have the opportunity to go. But
Mhm.
that just could be an opportunity or an avenue. But I do think it'll be something different than what we've already seen. But we will ultimately have to see. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the brand new Beyoncé album, Cowboy Carter. If you've listened to it, which we know you have, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.